Hey guys, Frosted Knives here, back with another book review, and today we are going to be reviewing the Stephen King book 11/22/63, the book that I have read for the first time. Now, I don't actually own a physical copy of the book. I only have it on my Kindle, and so I usually hold the book around while I do a review, but since I don't have a copy of the book to hold while I'm reviewing it, here's Dark of the Moon Shockwave that you can look at while I'm reviewing. He's going to stare at you menacingly. So, here it is on my Kindle, Stephen King's 11/22/63. And the particulars, it was published in 2011, and I had to look this up, the hardcover clocked in at 849 pages. On the Kindle it says it's 853 pages, so whatever. But there's what it looks like on the Kindle. And so, I just want to say at the start of the video that I've been getting a lot of comments on my videos about spoilers. And so I have decided that I'm not going to give you a blow-by-blow of the video of the story. Maybe that's too much of a spoiler. I'll just give you a brief overview, and then I will give you my thoughts and opinions on the story. That seems to work for most people. So, the basic story of 11/22/63 is, it's a time travel story, but really at its heart, it's a love story. Now, it takes place in Lisbon Falls, and Jake Epping, his friend Al Templeton owns a diner, and the diner has a really unique little feature to it, is that this diner has a time portal in it. And it's basically a time portal that goes to a specific date and a specific time. They call it the rabbit hole. But what Jake finds out from his friend Al, that there is a time portal in his diner that goes back to September 19th. Sometime in September at 11:59 noon, right, minute before noon in 1958. That's where the time portal goes. And Al discovered that in the back of his diner. And Al is dying. And his dying wish is that he wants to change history. And there are certain moments in history that he calls watershed moments. Things where really big things happen, and then history is irrevocably changed one way or the other. And Al thinks that if you go back in time and maybe change these watershed moments, that history will unfurl in a different way, and it might become better. So he decides that he wants to go back in time and stop the Kennedy assassination. But he's dying of cancer, and he can't do that, so his dying wish is for Jake to go back in time to 1958 and live the 4 or 5 years up to the assassination, and then prevent the Kennedy assassination, and maybe that'll change the world. And of course, Jake doesn't believe him at first, but then over a series of events, he realizes that he actually has the power to do this, and so Jake says, yes, I will go back and do this, I will grant your dying wish. And so there's our story, is that he goes back in time to 1958 and lives the years, 5 years to the assassination, to stop the Kennedy assassination. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And I'm not going to give you any more story than that as far as synopsis goes. I will say that while he is there in 1958, or shortly thereafter, he does wind up falling in love with a woman named Sadie. And there's your love story. While he basically has a 5-year chunk of time where he arrives and he's waiting for the assassination. And in that 5-year chunk of time, he falls in love and he starts a life for himself in the 50s and early 60s. But always knowing that this is hanging over his head, that at some point he is going to have to do what he said he was going to do, and he was going to have to stop Oswald from killing Kennedy. So even though he's living in the 50s and 60s and his life is sort of going on, that's always in the back of his mind. So there's the story in a nutshell. And I will say that I've never read this before, And I was pleasantly surprised. I have some questions and concerns, but overall, I thought this was a well-made book. Now, Stephen King did say that this was one of the books, sort of like Under the Dome and Blaze, that he had written or wanted to write when he was younger, when he was like 19, 20. He wanted to write this story way back when, just like Under the Dome, just like Blaze. But he said at the time, when he was young, he didn't think he had the ability to research it properly. He didn't have the maturity of a writer, so he just sort of shunted it off. And then he came back to it many decades later, and now we have the story. And I think it's a fairly well done story. I mean, it is a time travel story, so time travel stories are sort of rote, and we kind of know how these things sort of shake out. And it does end the way that you would expect it to end, based on what you know about the portal and the way that the portal works, and what Jake is trying to do. So I won't give it away, but it does end the way you expect it to end. But overall, it was a really good story, and it wasn't so much about time travel as it was about watershed moments in history and Jake, and maybe the inherent inevitability of the past and the future, and can things be changed? Should things be changed? Do we have the right to change the past? Do we have the right to create new futures? Do we have the right to tamper with things? Is that, just because we can do a thing, should we do that thing? Should we go back in time? Maybe if we go back and change something because we think it's going to be for the better, it actually doesn't become for the better. So these are all sort of the stories that Jake and Stephen King sort of wrestle with. Would you go back in time and kill Hitler? Should you go back in time and kill Hitler? Is that something that you should do, or should you just leave well enough alone? Would you be harming things more by removing an evil person or not? And so those are all of the problems and questions that when you think about time travel and changing things, that people question. It is very well written. It is really a small cast of characters. You've got Jake, and you've got Sadie, and you've got, of course, Oswald, and you've got some historical figures, and you've got some. So it's a really, small cast of characters, but they're really done. They're done really well. The story moves along really nicely. I never really got bored with it. I enjoyed the time that I spent in 1958 and 1960, in the 60s and the 50s. He did a really good job of portraying the 60s and the 50s as they were. You really get a feel for being in that time period. What is going on in the world. He gets to hear about some political stuff going on, historical stuff going on, the lingo and the societal stuff that was going on. I mean, he really drilled it down to the point where everything that took place in the 50s and 60s was accurate. And so you really got a good snapshot picture of that 5-year period of what it was like to live in Dallas, in Texas, in Jody, Texas, and Dallas in that time period. You really got a feel for how people were and what was going on and how people talked and how much things cost and what was going on in the political world and how it was so different from our world, what was different 50 years ago or 40 years ago compared to what it is now. So he did a really good job of painting the time period. Very accurate, very well done, from the automobiles to the music that was playing, to the lingo, to the way people talked, to the societal attitudes. Everything was spot on. Everything was done really well. You really felt like, of course I say it's spot on, but I don't know, I didn't actually live it, but you really felt like you were there. The character of Jake Epping was really good. Sadie was really good. All of the characters were good. I will say that Sadie was when he met her, she was coming out of an abusive relationship, and it was a weird abusive relationship. Like when you read the book and he talks about the marriage that Sadie had gotten away from, and you read about what was going on in that relationship, I got to say, it was really weird. It was creepy weird. It was just like, I didn't think of it that way, and it was just really oddball and creepy weird, and her husband was really just nutso, but I guess he was nutso in a 1960 kind of way, so it was different than 2011 nutso, but he was still certified crazy man, and so it was interesting to hear about that backstory. There's not a lot of action in the book. It's not an action book. I mean, because he does spend a lot of time waiting. He spends a lot of time waiting in Texas for his one moment to arrive. So there's not a lot of action per se, but there's a lot of story, and there's a lot of good story, and there's a lot of, you really get to feel about this relationship between Jake and Sadie. It's really well fleshed out. Jake's relationships with her and with the few people that he's made friends with, it's really, really well done. So you really focus a lot more on the relationships that he's growing with his community, with the schools that he's working at, with the people that he's being friends with. So you really get to see that, and you really get to see a little bit of King's interpretation of what it would be like as far as Oswald, how Oswald was doing things on a sort of day-to-day or month-to-month basis. The explanation that we get at the end of the book about what is going on, about the time travel bit, was pretty well explained. It wasn't over the top. It wasn't obnoxious. It wasn't unbelievable what was going on when they finally explained the mechanism of time travel and what Jake was actually doing when he was going back and forth in time, and how that was affecting the world and what was going on, was believable. It was pretty well written. You know, you can sometimes get bogged down and mired down with techie speak or just weird sciencey stuff, but it didn't have a lot of that. It had a pretty solid explanation about, hey, this is how this time travel works. This is what you're doing. Every time you go back and forth in this little rabbit hole of yours, this is what's happening. This is what you're screwing up. This is what you're screwing up. It's very plain English. He lays it out for Jake about, this is how it works. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is really how it works, and this is what you need to do in order to fix what you have created. So that was well done. We do get to see Derry, which is nice. He does go back to Derry in 1958, which, as you know, this takes place in September, starts around September 1958, which was just after the losers defeated It for the first time as children. So it was nice to go back to Derry. It's a little bit of a de facto sequel, not really a sequel, but it was nice to go back to Derry, see Derry again after the climactic battle with It when they were children. You do get to see Richie and Bev. I don't know if that's a spoiler or not, but whatever, you get that one. So it's nice to go back to Derry, and of course Jake doesn't really know about what happened in Derry. So when he gets there and he sees, he does know, like we all know, when he gets to Derry, he realizes that the town is bad. Like we all know that the town is bad, and so, but he doesn't really know why. And he gets to see what's going on a little bit. Doesn't spend a whole lot of time in Derry, but it was nice. It was nice to go back to Derry and to see that time period again, even if it was for a short amount of time. A couple other things that I liked about it was I liked Stephen King's take on Oswald and Kennedy. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you will know that there are 1,001 different conspiracies about the Kennedy assassination and how it happened and why it happened and who did it and how many people were involved and who actually shot Kennedy and all the stuff. There's conspiracy theorists all over the place, but Stephen King took the short route. He took the simple route. He didn't really get into any of that stuff, really, other than to say that these theories did existed, and in this particular story, Oswald was the lone gunman. He did not go into conspiracy theories. He did not try to explain conspiracy theories. He did not try to go into like the second man on the grassy knoll thing. He didn't try to complicate it. He didn't try to weave the conspiracy theories into the story. He stripped it all out and said, nope, and as far as my story goes, Oswald was the lone gunman, and that's what we're going with, and that's going to be the answer. And I like that. I think that's a good idea. I think bogging it down with too many theories and conspiracies about what happened would have been a mess. So he went the simple route, which I do appreciate. I am a little, I'm still thinking about the rabbit hole, I don't know why Stephen King picked what he did. The fact that this rabbit hole goes back to a specific date in a specific year at a specific time. Like, you always go back to 11:59 a.m. on September, I think it's 19th. You're going to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure. Sometime in September. In 1958. Like, he always goes back to that same exact time, that moment in time. And it's weird. It's like an odd thing. Like, I would ask King, why did you pick that time? Why did you pick that date? Why did you pick that month? Like, was there a reason that you picked that date and time and month? Or, I mean, because it seems very specific that it goes to that single point in time, but there's no real reason for it. He could have, I suppose, picked any point in time. He could have picked a closer point in time to 63 or further away time. I don't know why he picked that particular time. It works. I'm just curious myself as to what went through that, why he would pick that particular time. You know, I'm sure there's a reason for it. Maybe if somebody knows, or maybe if somebody's heard of why he's done that, that would be interesting to find out. But that's a nitpick. Like, it was almost like a built-in failsafe. Like he built himself a failsafe into the story, so that way he will always have an exit strategy. He built in his own exit strategy, that the rabbit hole always goes back to that point in time, and when you come back through the rabbit hole, if you to go back, it's like a complete reset. Like, everything is reset, like a reboot. So it's like King almost built in his own exit strategy, his own kill switch, his own God in the machine, if you will. Maybe that's why he did it. It's just like, it's like an automatic reset. It's like an automatic, Etch-a-Sketch. You don't like it, you wipe it clean, you start over. But other than that, I thought this story was really good. I haven't watched the Hulu show. I'm gonna want to watch it to see how it translates to the book. But I mean, overall, for never having read it and being kind of late to the game and reading it now, I thought it was really well done. His large books can be a little hit or miss. His books that edge to the 1,000-page mark can be a little hit or miss. They can be really good, or they can be really bloated and draggy. This wasn't bloated and draggy. This was really well done. It was very interesting. I liked the characters. I liked the love story. Everything was believable. I liked watching Jake interact and build this relationship in a world that wasn't his own, in a time period that wasn't his own. I thought it was very well done. I thought the resolution made sense. I thought the ending made sense. I thought the explanation of the time travel made sense. It wasn't too complicated. It wasn't too sciencey. It wasn't too bogged down in minutia or techie stuff. I thought that he did it really, really well, explained it really well. I thought it was put together well. I don't think there was a lot of bloat in the story. I liked the historical aspect of it, so you can kind of, read a little bit about what was going on historically at the time, because that is an interesting time period in history. So I like that we went there. I'm glad that he didn't go to, let's go kill Hitler, or let's go do something else, which is a little more common. Stopping the Kennedy assassination is not as common as saying, I'm going to go back and stop Hitler. I'm going to go back and stop World War II. I'm going to go back and stop the biggies. Not a lot of time travel literature out there focusing on the Kennedy assassination and focusing on stopping that particular watershed. So that was nice. That was a breath of fresh air to have something different, instead of just, the same old, same old. And Stephen King could have given us the same old time travel story, but he didn't. He really didn't, and I appreciate that. I thought it was really well done, really well researched, really well written. I thought it's well worth your time. It's interesting to see Derry again. It was interesting to read about Jake's adventures, and you really started to feel bad for him. He just wanted to. He wanted to do this thing. He wanted to stop the Kennedy assassination. But then when he got there, he built a life for himself. And then he started getting torn. Like, he wanted to stay in that time period. He wanted to live that life because he was finally happy. But he had this obligation that he needed to go do. He wanted to go change the future. And so that was always hanging over him. So as you read the book and you get happy for him and you get sad for him and you enjoy what he's doing, you know that the end is that he has to leave all of that and he has to go do the thing that he was sent to. So it's bittersweet. And then, of course, the ending was really bittersweet. So you felt bad for Jake. You felt happy for him. You felt all these emotions because you wanted him to be happy and you wanted him to live your life. But at the other end of it, you know that he wasn't going to be able to because he has this mission, this thing that he's going to change the future. So it was a big heavy thing for him to carry. It's a big burden to not only change the past, but to see what it does to the future and realize that when you change the past and realize that how the future changes, good or bad or indifferent, that's on you. You did that. Whatever change happens because of what you did, that's on you. And so when he realizes the enormity of the future because of what he did, that's a burden and that's a lot to carry. And I just think Stephen King did a really good job with this book. It's definitely, as far as his big books go, one of his better ones. Certainly, in my opinion, is better than Under the Dome, which I didn't really like a whole lot. I would definitely recommend you reading it. If you've never read it, you're in for a treat. I got to give it a, what is that? What do you think? What do you want to give it? Oh, that's what you want to give it? Okay, we're going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars because it's not perfect, but it's a really good read. So 4 out of 5 stars for 11/22/63. And there's also a lot of Dark Tower references in this book, by the way. There's a lot of reference to the number 19. A lot of reference to the number 19 in this book. So it's almost like what's going on is going on a level of the tower. I did notice a lot of tower references, a lot of allusions to the number 19. So I got your number, King. I know you're tying this into the tower. Probably, you know, at another level of the tower. I mean, obviously, if he's going back in time to Derry with it, and it is definitely on the tower, then 11/22/63 is also on the tower. So this could be part of, considered part of the Dark Tower canon books. Definitely, if you're going to read all about the Dark Tower series, I would include 11/22/63 into it. All right, that was long-winded, but it was a long-winded book. It was done really well. 4 out of 5 stars. You should go read it. I should probably go get a physical copy, even though I have it on my Kindle. Definitely worth owning, definitely worth reading. It was a great and enjoyable read. So until next time, that's Shockwave. I'm Frosty, and I will see you in the next video.